Radiation. You distinguish between water veins, ground mixing and fault lines. You explain that there are certain radiation fields in the ground and these are sometimes influenced by geological faults or formations. What kind of an influence does that have on us? Or how should I understand this?
Fundamentally, we distinguish two different areas. On the one hand, there's natural radiation, the so-called geopathic stress, and the technical radiation zones, that is, everything that humans have created, so to speak.
You mean electronic pollution, phone tower radiation and the like?
Exactly. And all of this is pure physics. It's not something you have to believe in. It's physics, pure and simple. And with regard to natural radiation, we distinguish 5 different types of radiation: water veins, fault lines, ground mixing, global lines, and the Curry grid. Those are the 5 types that we, and scientists in general, recognize. There's another type which is still disputed, but we'll omit that for now. So, and the big question from homeowners is, but how does a water vein produce radiation? You have the normal water cycle. Water evaporates, a cloud forms, it rains, the rain hits the earth and seeps into it, collects there, and then the cycle is repeated. And when the water hits the soil and penetrates it, seeps into it and flows through it, it carries trace elements along with it. Thus, the water is nothing more than the means of transport for the sediments. Think of when there's heavy rainfall and the rivers turn different colors, they suddenly become brown. And this brown is caused by the sediments being transported by the water. And these sediments have very small traces of iron, zinc, copper particles, etc. Now, when an iron particle encounters a copper particle, ionization occurs, and that's what we then designate as ionizing. You can measure it with a scintillation counter, but it's quite complex with regard to the instrumentation, as I need a lot of different things.
Isn't it an incredibly small amount when something seeps out, or do you have to have a huge current at least 1 meter in diameter flowing beneath the house?
Well, a water vein isn't deep at all, but rather broad. There are water veins that are on average 1.5 to 2.5 or 3 meters wide, but only 1 to 2 centimeters deep. The water seeps through to an impermeable layer and then flows across that.
Okay. So, if I've understood you correctly, there really is a measurable value or a certain number of atoms and ions that move through such a water vein, and they can be physically measured?
Yes, that's right. For example, I'll keep this very simple, just to give you the basic idea. Think of a person traveling in a balloon. Now, when the envelope of the balloon has a positive charge, it's made of a certain type of nylon, and it travels across a large river. And this river contains stones and such things. And this radiation that's generated by the water friction, by these elements, would also be positively charged. Then the balloon comes along, and there's something like an invisible barrier. And if things go wrong, the positively charged material meets the positively charged barrier, and boom, the balloon is stopped in its path. It can't continue on because of this invisible barrier. Every ballooner knows this. And our ballooner will just have to wait until a gust of wind pushes him past this obstacle.
Or he has to turn up the burner a bit so he ascends? That's interesting.
There are lots of things in everyday life and in nature that we consider normal, but when you think about why something happens, how it occurs, the underlying causes, etc., there are lots of cross-links.
So in the first step, we understand that there are certain natural forms of radiation, but how do they affect us? What's the connection? Why do we react to them in such a way that some people become ill or are otherwise influenced by it?
There are 2 groups of living beings in nature, radiation seekers and radiation avoiders. Cats like radiation, dogs don't, ants do. We humans are radiation avoiders. And in ancient times, when we lived in good caves and slept on our bundles of straw, we didn't have this specialist terminology yet. Back then, people ascribed their problems to bad dreams or evil spirits. And then they picked up their bundle of straw and tried out various places. And if the new place wasn't any better, they tried out other places in the cave until they said, "Oh, that feels good here. I'll stay here." And today, of course, you can't really do that because the layouts of the houses are all planned in advance so that the architect specifies where your bed goes.
And most importantly, which direction it faces.
Wall socket on the right, wall socket on the left, boom, that's it. So those are all influences that we can no longer change. That means that my patient ends up lying there over the next 20 or 30 years. That's why we always recommend taking 2 or 3 hours with an expert before you build your house or move into a new apartment and doing all the measurements, taking these into account and planning accordingly. That saves a lot of grief.